Hello and welcome back to the What the Falk podcast in association with Viper Goalkeeping. Today's guest is a former Leicester City and Sunderland winger and someone who has bravely spoken about mental health issues since his retirement. Welcome to the show, Matty Piper. How are you, mate? You all right?
How are you, Grail? Thanks
Yeah.
for having me on, mate.
Not a problem, mate.
I just thought I'd show everyone that.
Yeah.
Fell over, busted my head on the toilet, and I wasn't drunk. Everyone, you know the trouble. This is the trouble. You know when you come out and you're so open and honest and you tell people about your struggles and the fact I was addicted to alcohol and such and such. Every time you have a mishap like this, people always think, is he drinking again? Is this happening? So no, I wasn't drinking. My blood pressure just dropped and I fell over and headbutted the toilet. But we're all good, mate. We're all good.
I read the tweets and stuff afterwards, and I read your tweet afterwards, and everyone's just like, "I hope you're okay, Pipes. Hope everything's well." Like that's not how Twitter works. Like
no, that's what I put. That's what I put out there. I was like, this is not supposed to be what Twitter's like. You know, we all know Twitter is the take the piss playground of the social medias.
Absolutely.
I thought I was going to put it out there and get butchered for hours, but everyone was really sweet and nice.
Bless them. Maybe we're all becoming aware of each other's, making sure we're looking after each other. You know what I mean? Which is nice in a way.
Yeah.
First and foremost, you became a bit of a pro during lockdown of podcasting yourself, if I don't mind saying. I listened to every single one of them that you did. How much did you enjoy catching up with old teammates and stuff like that over lockdown?
Yeah, no, it was good. I mean, I wish I had done it where I do a platform like what yours is on your podcast. You know, where you got a longer period of time and you can talk and get deeper into different subjects. I just had a set of questions and I tried to do it. Basically, it was a podcast for Twitter because I had the 2-minute 20 rule. So I had to try and fit it all in 2 minutes, 20 seconds. So it was just fast fire questions, but it was good catching up with everyone. And as you know, before we came on today, we probably spoke for half an hour before we started the show. So catching up with all them people, Mick McCarthy, mate, Mick McCarthy was brilliant. Battered me for about half an hour. How injured I was, and Pipes, if you were a horse, you'd be shot. You would have been shot, and all this kind of stuff. Mate, absolutely battered me. But great to catch up with everyone. And probably my favourite, though, I think, was Niall Quinn.
Yeah,
Niall Quinn was an absolute. I already knew it because obviously I played with Niall, but proper top man.
He's got a real aura about him. I interviewed him last year just before the Checker trade on a different platform. And when he walked into the room, it was like a face-to-face one. He's just got this huge aura. Was he like that in the dressing room, Quinny, as well then?
Yeah, he was. I mean, as soon as I got there, on the podcast that I did, he referred to me as one of the young lads. Even though I had signed for quite big money and I was already, I think, 20 or 21.
Yeah.
He sort of referred to me as one of the young lads. But that's how he was. He sort of had everyone under his wings. And it was funny because when he spoke about it in the podcast, he said that the time that was ruined at that football club was when Howard Wilkinson came to the club. And that's sort of when older pros helping out younger pros and we're all like in it together. That feeling of in it together, what we had on the reader, sort of disappeared when Howard Wilkinson came in. And I was like, Quinny, exactly my thoughts entirely, because people know what I think about Howard. I've seen him recently, actually. This is the weird thing. I've seen him at a train station in London, and I didn't think he'd recognise me. So I'm sort of swearing under my breath, like fucking idiot, like this as I'm walking by him. And he's gone, "How are you, Pipes?" And I was like, "Oh my God!" And he was really nice, and we spoke. And I was thinking, "Oh God, I hope he's not seen any of them podcasts I've done with the Sunderland fans."
The thing is, he could listen to like a plethora of different podcasts from a Sunderland perspective, Howard. And I don't think, unfortunately, there's one guy that spoke to me about him, and we're talking years ago, that kind of went, "Oh yeah, I was used to that kind of management." And it was Stefan Schwartz. Of all the people, he was like, "Yeah, that's normal in Europe." And I was like, "Really?"
Wow. I mean, he was successful with the style that he had, obviously under Leeds. And, football moves on though, and you got to adapt. That's why Alex Ferguson was so good, because he adapted. He knew that you can't keep that sort of that style of management and keep getting results. So you have to adapt and change. And the only thing, the kindest thing I'd say about Howard is it worked back then with Leeds, but 20 years later, you can't keep that same style and think it's going to keep working.
And better than Steve Cockrell, though, I suppose. I always remember Steve Cockrell more than Howard. Jesus.
Yeah, mate. Another one, but totally different in the fact that he was very arrogant. That's
I've
one
heard
thing.
that.
That's one thing that I can't stand. He was hugely arrogant. But obviously, you've heard the famous Tom Pepper story now. When he butchered both of them, and Cottrell was sort of snivelling and crying in the background because he didn't get the job when Howard got sacked. That was a good day. Without being horrible, you know,
I get where you're coming from. Yeah.
I try and be a nice guy, and I'm sure if I met them at different parts of my life, and they weren't my managers and assistant managers, it might have been a different story. And you know, I hear Jamie Redknapp talks very highly of Steve Cottrell. Said he's a really nice guy. Helped him through a tough time when he sort of finished football. So they obviously have got nice qualities, but I just didn't see any of them.
Mate, in my jobs, you look at people look at it as football as a totally different thing. I've worked in jobs, and I could give you some managers that I'd run through a brick wall for in a call centre. And I could also give you managers that like to run into a brick wall that I work in a call centre. Do you know what I mean? And I'm sure it doesn't make them bad people. It's chemistry, isn't it? Sometimes, especially with football.
That's exactly it, mate. And that's why I was really careful. I mean, I tell the truth when I come on podcasts and things like that, but I'm just really careful about butchering anyone too much, just because I don't know what was going on with them that day that I met them. I don't know the issues that they've got going on in their lives, and so I try and stay balanced with what I say about people.
Yeah, no, I think it's the right thing to do, but at the same time, if you want to butcher them, I'm not going to stop you. From my side, I'm a Sunderland fan, so what I quite like talking about Mick McCarthy before we delve into sort of your really far in the past. I liked with Mick McCarthy how he rinsed you instantly and rinsed Michael Bridges instantly. Is that just what Mick Mac's like? Is he just kind of like, because you know what, it's one of those things when you listen to it and you wouldn't have took offense to it. It was just funny. You just tell he was like that. Is that what he's like in the dressing room as well?
Yeah, and that's why I liked him. You know, everyone that knows me in my life, who's very close to me, knows that one of my big points that I always talk about is the importance of being honest.
Yeah.
And even if you're telling me something that I don't really want to hear, if it's coming from an honest view, you know, all my kids, my missus, everyone, tell me it. Just relay it to me. And that's how the gaffer was. And that's why I got on so well with him. And that's probably why I didn't get on very well with Howard, because he would talk behind your back. He wouldn't say things at a certain point, but then he'd say it later on in a team environment that he could have said to me face to face, things like that. And Mick McCarthy was very much like that. Salt of the earth, mate. That's the saying that comes to mind when I think of Mick McCarthy. Salt of the earth, says it how it is. Perhaps if you were a horse, you'd be shot by now, lad. You know, I'll always remember that saying. And I put
good impression that.
Yeah. Well, he said it that often because I was always in the injury room, weren't I? But he was. But we had our set twos as well. You know, where I stand up to him. I drove away from the training ground one day because he wanted me to play in a behind closed doors game, and he just wouldn't have that. Wasn't going to play. He thought that the physios had told him that maybe some of my pain in my knee was in my head now because I'd had so many knee operations. And he just come in the dressing room and he was like, "Get your boots on and fucking get out there, perhaps." And I was like, "Gaffer, I ain't playing." And we went backwards and forwards until it was full-blown arguments. And then I was just like, you know what? Fuck this, Gaffer. I'm going. I got in my car and I drove off. But when you make a decision like that with a manager like Mick McCarthy, as I'm driving out the training ground, you're all still boosted up from the adrenaline and you're feeling tough that you've stood your ground. And then when that adrenaline starts to seep away and you're heading home with a gaffer like Mick McCarthy, you fucking absolutely fill your pants, mate. Thinking, oh my God, I pulled the car over. I was like, oh God, what have I done? All sweat coming down my head. I said, I've got to go back and apologise and say, Gaffer, I'm really sorry. I'll play in the game. But I carried on driving home. And the next day, I got a voicemail on my phone. He said, come into the training ground early. So I thought he was going to sack me. Yeah. And he was brilliant. He said, I can understand. You know, that's why I liked him. I can understand why you did what you did. I'm going to fine you. a week's wages for doing what you did. He said, we can't get past that. But I understand why you're doing what you did. You've had constant knee injuries. It must be tough for you. And really got down with me on that level. And that's what makes him such a good manager, I think, because he understands his players.
Yeah, you know what? And it's like, I always refer to the Ipswich thing and the fact that Ipswich fans really didn't seem to take to him. Then he left and they've kind of plummeted through the divisions. I had, who was it I had on? Matt Jarvis, who had him at Wolves. And he more or less said the same thing, favourite manager he's had. And I mean, there's something about, you know what it is with Mick McCarthy? I don't know him. I've never had a conversation with him. I only know him as the character he is on TV, and also the manager of my football club for a few years. And I like him. I really like him. I remember when he got sacked, and you've got to bear in mind, he was part of he managed us up until March of our worst ever, well, the Premier League's at the time, worst ever football club in terms of the points that we got there. And I don't think you'll find many people on Sunderland that'll say, oh, Mick McCarthy, what a terrible manager. Everyone seems to have time for him and kind of almost understand that that issue was along the line of the budget he had as opposed to Mick McCarthy being a bad manager because, and no disrespect to some of the lads that I know, but if you look at the team that he got up, the team that went down under Coleman was probably better on paper than that team that he got up. I mean, you got players in there that he brought in from Dumbarton, Neil Collins, Danny Collins, Chester, Liam Lawrence, Mansfield. And I know they all went on to have good careers like Dean Whitehead and whatnot, especially, but they were absolute no ones with no experience in that division. And they won the bloody league. Stephen Elliott. He turned Stephen Elliott from a youth team player to a 15-goal-a-season championship striker. That doesn't happen these days. It just doesn't.
No. Jeff Whitley, Cole
Jeff
Robinson.
Whitley.
You know, players that he got that no one else sort of wanted. But that's exactly what I'm saying. Because he was that guy, a real great man manager. So he could get 100% out of a player that another manager could only get 25, 30% out of. He made them players believe in themselves, and that team ethic, and it's all of us together. That's what made those performances go up. And it reminds me of a story, and I don't know if I've said this before, it's just triggered it in my mind, that what the gaffer's like. So we played down, it was when the season we won the championship. Yeah. And we played down south somewhere. So we flew back to Newcastle Airport. We all come back, and just to encapsulate what the gaffer was like, as in, this is all of us together. The gaffer, a few of the physios and his backroom staff were sort of leading us through the airport as we were walking in Newcastle. And we had just won the game down south, whoever we played, and we were walking through. And this Newcastle fan, clearly because he had a Newcastle top on, sort of walked by and he went, "Fuck off, McCarthy." I can't do the Newcastle accent, or I'd do it. He said, "Fuck off, McCarthy," like that. And then he started butchering a couple of the players. And then the gaffer was just turning around to us all and saying, ignore him, keep walking, lads." So we're all walking, but then there was another 3 or 4 lads that come and joined him. They're obviously going on a boozy trip somewhere, and they all had Newcastle tops on. And then they kept shouting and abusing us as we're walking through. And it's all young, fit players, obviously, that could, a few of them could look after themselves, Kevin Kyle, people like that. And then the guy went, "Stadium of light, more like the stadium of shite." And the gaffer went, "I've had fucking enough of this." Chucked his bags down and he went, "Come on then, you bastard. Come on then." And he stood there like this, and we're all like, "Okay now." And he's like, "Lads, get behind me. Come on, you bastard." And he's standing there like that. And then this lad wanted it. And I didn't think the gaffer, I seen for the first time, like, I love the gaffer, but I seen for the first time that, oh, you fucker, he's melted a little bit, because he was having it and he thought that would scare him to make him run off. Yeah. And this lad went, "Come on then," and started walking forward. And then the gaffer was sort of, no, them ones, he's sort of backing up. And his arms come down a little further. And then he's like, "Lads, get your stuff, we're going." So we all grabbed our bags. I mean, people like me, mate, who ain't scrappers, we grabbed our bags. Mate, I was in that car park before fucking anyone could realise. Got in my car, we're all filing into our cars, all these Sunderland players, because then loads of them started coming out. There must have been about 15, 20 lads then that wanted to scrap and to get something in the newspapers. You know, scrapping with the Sunderland players and and everyone's cars are shooting off in all different directions. I've left my lights on for the whole time we was away. So I get in my car they're all searching around the cars in the car park at Newcastle Airport, trying to find all Sunderland players or staff. And my fucking car won't start. So I'm ringing all the lads, come back, pick me up. My car won't start. Fuck off, Pipes. There were loads of them in the end. We ain't coming back there. So for about half an hour, while I was waiting for the AA, I hid in the footwell of the car while all these lads are walking around all the cars trying to find us. I said to the gaffer the next morning, "Oi, gaffer, don't be starting no fights and then not fucking backing it up, you fucking wimp." But that's what he was like, though. It was like, it's us against everyone else.
Yeah. You wouldn't expect them to come back, though, to be fair. It's like, it's proper, like, standard football crack, isn't it? Getting shouted at in the street and in the airport and stuff like that. It's probably just taken them by surprise that the lads actually wanted some. And then if there's been loads of them as well, fair enough.
Yeah, mate. Loads.
I'm quite surprised that Kevin Carl wasn't at the front of the... I mean, Kevin Carl would throw himself in front of anything, wouldn't he? Pretty much.
Yeah, normally. I mean, some of the lads that you thought were tough at that time didn't really do anything. So, you know, the lads that ain't tough anyway, we were the ones that got to the cars first, like sprinting off, all these Newcastle fans running after us and trying to hide in the car park. But it was good time, but it was just a story to show you what the gaffer was like. He was like always front and centre. He backed down a little bit, to be fair to him. I'm not saying he shitted, but he backed down a little bit. But he had the, you know, as a footballer, looking at that, where your gaffer's standing at the front when there's loads of people trying to get at you.
Yeah.
That's how he built that team ethic, and that's why they did so well under him.
Before I probably delve too deep into Sunderland, because there's so much stuff to chat with Sunderland, I obviously want to speak right time at Leicester, because that's your club. I know you're Leicester and Sunderland because of who you played for, but Leicester's your club, let's be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's ever done it before, but like delving back into your childhood, obviously you're a big Leicester fan, so what are the earliest memories of you like falling in love with football? Because we've all had that moment, haven't we?
Yeah, my mum playing with me in the back garden, really. My old man used to take me out. He really wanted a footballer as a son, my old man. So my older brother's a professional cricketer, or he was a professional cricketer. He played for Warwickshire. But my old man always wanted a footballer for a son because he had dreams to play football. And he took me out in the back garden when I'm 3-4 years old. I kept picking it up. And my mum played at the time. So my old man was like, come in the house, hey, he's fucking useless. He's never going to play. So for the next 2-3 years, it was my mum playing with me in the back garden, taking me park, doing this, doing that when the old man's at work. So that's what triggered it. And then as soon as I started playing for the school team and scoring goals, that feeling of scoring a goal, and it just took me on from there. And then I signed for Leicester when I was 8 years old. So never really looked back from them, mate. And I went Forest first, actually. I went Nottingham Forest for 2 training sessions. Cried all the way there. Cried all through the training sessions because I didn't want to be there. Not because it was Forest, just because I was nervous at that time. And then Leicester come a knocking. And as soon as I got to Leicester, it just felt comfortable. It was loads of lads there that I played against in schools and around Leicestershire. So I went into Leicester and never looked back. But the funny thing is, my old man is from London. And he moved to Leicester. I met my mum. He's a massive Arsenal fan. Huge Arsenal fan since he was 8-9 years old. So in my house, my mum's a huge Leicester fan. My old man's a huge Arsenal fan. So I grew up liking Arsenal and Leicester, but obviously playing for Leicester as well.
With Leicester at the time, when you signed for them when you were about 8, who would have been the main manager at that point, or even the youth team manager?
The manager at that point was...
Was it O'Neill?
Brian Little.
Oh, Brian Little. Jeez, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Brian Little, who I know quite well now because we've got a mutual friend and I see him all the time. And no, the funny thing was, Brian Little was the first man to... It was on Sky Sports. Imagine this. So on Sky Sports, I'm 13 years old. I think it was 13 or 14. I'm sitting at home. It was a Leicester v Derby match. And Brian Little's in the studio because he had moved on as manager by then. 13 years old. And they're talking about prospects at Leicester City. So you've got to think this was a Premier League game and he's in the studio talking. And he said, we've got Emil Heskey, a guy called Emil Heskey coming through. We've got a guy called Stefan Oakes and Julian Joachim. He's reading all these names off. And then he said, and then they're really excited by a real young guy. He's only 13 or 14 at the minute, but Matt Piper. And I was like, what the fuck? I couldn't believe it. He said my name on Sky Sports. And I was only 13 or 14 because I'm one of these lads. You know, when you get a dog, I've got a dog. You know, when you've got a dog where you pick a stick up or a ball and it just looks at the ball and then you throw it and it fetches it, brings it back, and it's all about the ball. That's what I was like playing football. It was just the ball. It weren't sitting there thinking, oh, am I a good player? You know, trying to analyse it. It was just run after the ball, shoot, score, cross. It was just really simple for me. So when that was the first time that triggered my mind to think, oh shit, maybe I'm decent, because I didn't look at it and think coaches or anything thought I was a brilliant player at the time.
In your mind, though, do you look back now? You know, what are you, 37, 38?
Yeah, 38 now, yeah.
Do you look back now, though, and understand why they were excited by your talent, like in the raw materials that you had? Because from my memory, obviously, I only seen you when you were 20, 21, and it was very much the raw materials, like pace, speed, ability to get the ball in, win a corner. Looking back then, when you were 13, 14, I imagine you had at least some of those qualities, or all of them. Can you understand now why they were excited at the age that you are now and the amount of football that you've watched?
Yeah, I think, I can do, because I was quick, I was direct, but I also had a good touch. And around that time, there were sort of players coming through that they only had really one outstanding attribute. Well, I only had one outstanding attribute, my pace, but I had a good touch to go with it. So I think at that time, they looked at it and they thought, we can create a player out of this. And at that time, I was a forward, and they changed me into a winger, just because at that time, getting in the first team at Leicester, they wanted more crosses in the box because they had the likes of Brian Dean, James Scrowcroft. They had sort of big guys that needed crosses. So the last 2 years of me being in the youth team, they sort of converted me to a winger. But yeah, you can look back now and think, wow, yeah, I was a good player.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to sort of your idols growing up, then if you go to a club when you're 8 years old, I imagine you've already started watching football because you're within a football club. I think I was about 6 when I started watching football, something like that. So who were your heroes growing up then? Were you looking towards the forwards, or did you kind of watch more wingers as you were growing up?
Yeah, more strikers. Ian Wright was huge for me. Ian Wright. And so I used to do the ball boying at Leicester. Mm-hmm. And Ian Wright, you know, the old saying goes, never meet your heroes.
Yeah.
So I absolutely idolised him. He was all over my wall at home. And even though I was a Leicester fan, I had Arsenal all over my room because of Ian Wright. And I was a ball boy, and I was a real shy, quiet kid. I sprinted on the pitch after Arsenal v Leicester at Filbert Street. And I said, Wrighter, can I have your autograph, please? Like, it took, you don't realise, Graham, how much courage that took me to ask a professional footballer that at that time, because I was so shy. And he just turned around and went, nah, and kept walking. And I was like, but Wrighter. And he went, didn't you hear what I said? I said, no. And I was like, fucking hell. And they say never meet your heroes, don't they?
Yeah.
So that killed me a bit, but I still love him. I've met him since then, because I do the commentary for Leicester now.
Yeah.
So sometimes he's in the media suites where I go in, and I told him that story just to fucking make him feel bad. But he was like, "Well, what was the score in the game?" I said, "You lost 1-0." And he went, "Well, there you go then. Stop moaning, because I ain't signing autographs if we've lost." And I was like, "Oh yeah, true."
Did you ever hear the story about Roy Keane? Did you play with Nyron Nosworthy?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So
big nugs there.
Oh, what a guy. The smoothest voice on the planet. And a man that can really pack away a pint, considering he's got like this ridiculously ripped physique. Like, it doesn't look like he drinks any pints. But
specimen, mate.
He was on about Roy Keane, and Roy Keane did similar to a young lad at like an airport when he was at Sunderland. It's this young Man United fan, I think it was, and said, "Oh, can I have your autograph?" And no, you can't. And the granddad went, "Oh, he's a big Man United fan, like he idolises you. Can he please have your autograph?" And Roy Keane was like, "Nope, I've said no." And he said the lad left it for a bit, and then the granddad went over and was like, "Please, Roy, can he please have your autograph, or just a photo, just anything? Like, he absolutely idolises you." And Roy went, "No." And the kid started crying. And what Roy Keane did apparently was he put his hands on the kid's shoulders, He goes, you know, sometimes you're going to get disappointed in life. You've got to bounce back from things like this. It's like he didn't get the autograph. Didn't get the autograph, but he got a team talk from Roy Keane, which, if, in my opinion, at like 10, 12-year-old, is actually probably better than an autograph, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's good advice, and you know, just delving into my life and the fact that I'm a dad of 4. I often think, because my dad was really tough on me when I was younger, and he constantly told me that I'd never make it because I didn't have the heart, I didn't have the desire, I didn't have the mentality. He didn't think to make it as a professional footballer. He'd tell me that I had the talent, but he'd always say, "You'd never make it, never. You're not got the right mental capacity to make it as a top flight athlete." So imagine hearing that constantly from your dad. So when I scored the last goal at Filbert Street just before I left Leicester.
Yeah.
And there's a picture of me. It's the most picture that goes around. It's like up at the club in Leicester, and it's pointing towards the stadium when I scored that goal. And a lot of people think that that's a point of admiration and love because I'm pointing up to my family. That's me pointing to my old man to say, don't ever fucking tell me I can't do something. So whether he did that all through my life because he knew, but I don't think my dad's that intelligent, because he knew, right, I'm gonna use this kind of psychology to push him forward. You know, I'm going to use that negative talk constantly to drive him forward. Because I'm lovely with my kids now. One of my youngest now plays for Burton. He's a really good player. He's in the academy at Burton. And I'm constantly, you know, plenty of praise. Don't worry about it, mate. We won the best game today, but we'll keep moving forward. I think, am I doing the right thing? Because am I being too nice? Are we too nice now as a society? So, and as parents and as coaches, because you've got to, you know, there's that famous documentary that come out. There's no Something in Paradise. It was on BT Sport, and it's about, Stephen Gerrard talks a lot about all these academy kids now. They've got everything given to them. Mm-hmm. They've got the boots, they've got the kit. They're getting dropped off at different places. We do so much from now. Are we leaving enough for them to do themselves, where they've got to, you know, be self-resilient and try and get there themselves? And it's a really big issue I look at, obviously, because of the academy that I run. Because you've got to have different ways of trying to bring them forward psychologically. And it's just an interesting one to me, I think.
Yeah, sometimes you need the knocks. I think my opinion is sometimes you do need those knocks to your confidence, and you have to have those resilience, as you said. But I watched on topic. I watched something with Robin van Persie the other day. I think his kid's in the in the Feyenoord academy, I think, and he said there was a game where he was playing against Ajax. I think his kid's like 13, 14. And he didn't get picked. He was on the bench, and I think they beat Ajax, which obviously a big derby. And he said in the car back, he was complaining, and he was like, "Dad, like the coach this and the coach that." And he said he was moaning. He said, and Robin van Persie said, "I said to him, like, look, I'll always love you, like, regardless of anything. But at the minute, you sound like a loser. You're blaming everyone else. And if you want to be a loser, I still love you. You're my son. Like, all I care about for you is that you're okay, and that when you're 20, you're a good person." He says, but to me, you know, as a man, you sound like a loser at the minute. Like, if you want to be a loser and blame other people, that's fine. And he said on the Monday when they went back to training, he said, "I'm going to go watch the session just to see how he reacted, see if he's going to have the same kind of, haven't got picked." And he said he'd seen like this kind of tiger just like running about the pitch and sort of like getting stuck into tackles and running and showing his pace and his power. And he said, the guy wants to be a winner then. It's like, but then I did also think at the same time, not everyone has Robin van Persie as a dad. So, you know, like, fuck that guy. On topic, one thing I did want to ask, and I ask a lot of footballers this, and I get a lot of similar answers, but different experiences. You went to Mansfield on loan when you were at Leicester for 8 games. Talking about academy players, a lot of the time now you'll have 22-year-olds that haven't played more than 5 games in the first team. When I was young, your young players would always go out on loan unless they were like special talents like Rooney. So your time at Mansfield, what did those 8 games sort of teach you, and how did they improve you?
that taught me a lot, and it goes back to, so just so you can watch it or people listening can watch it, it's a great documentary. It's called No Hunger in Paradise. So when everything gets done for you, you hunger to get there yourself and to drive yourself forward is gone. And that's exactly what Mansfield gave me. I did not want to play at that standard. Like, I did not want to go back down to that standard. I got in for one game at Leicester City when Gary Parker, the old Aston Villa Leicester footballer. Yeah, great player. He took over as manager for one game of Leicester City when Peter Taylor got sacked. And he was my reserve team manager. And he said, if I get any games in charge of the first team, I'm going to put you in, because I was doing really well in the reserves. And he stuck true to his word. And we played the great Leeds side of Viduka, Kuehl, Rio Ferdinand, Jonathan Woodgate, Gary Kelly, unbelievable side, Ian Hart. And we got, on my debut, I played really well, but we got beat 6-0.
6-0, yeah.
Yeah, it was horrible. But because I had played well against them great players, it gave me the confidence to think I belong at this level, even though it was only for one game. So then Dave Bassett and Mickey Adams came in as managers and shipped me out on loan straight away. And I was gutted, absolutely gutted, because I thought, oh my God. But it helped me so much, because dropping down to that level of League Two and the things that were going on, like there's no canteen and you got to go to the corner shop and you got to clean your own kit and and this is what it comes back to with what I'm saying, no hunger in paradise. Because I had to do all that, it made me think, I don't really want to play at this level. I got to do as well as I can while I'm here and embrace it. But I've got to keep constantly working to get back to that Premier League level that I wanted to play at. Yeah. So it was massive for me, huge. And I think loaning out youngsters to lower levels is a brilliant way to drive them forward.
There's so many players, even sort of recent for me, would be like Johnny Evans at Sunderland. Yeah, I know he didn't necessarily make it at Man United, as some people would say, but in my opinion, he did. He's still playing top 4 or top 5 with Leicester. Obviously, he had the relegation West Brom, but those 2 seasons that he spent at Sunderland, one battling relegation, the other one gaining promotion, working under Roy Keane. He only dropped one level, but look at what became of him. In my opinion, still one of the best centre halves of the past 10 years in the Premier League, easily. So. And I think it's the same across the board. You know, I've spoken to a few players who played in the SPL. I had Declan Gallagher on, who now plays for Scotland. He was at Celtic, couldn't get anywhere near the team, ended up at Stranraer, of all places, which, I don't know whether you've ever been to Stranraer, but it's a very small town and a very small club. It's where Kevin Kyle's from, funnily enough.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? Talking about that, Kevin Kyle, what was he like? Because I can believe how famous he's got with Open Goal, because Open Goal, I'll openly admit, is probably my favourite podcast that I listen to. But was he always that kind of character in the dressing room where you think you could pull off kind of a wingman on a podcast or a talk show or something like that?
Yeah, no, because first of all, Kylo, he used to come in scruffy, he didn't care what he looked like, he looked like, you know, footballers, they normally come in, they're driving really nice cars, they're all dressed, dripping with these designer clothes. He weren't like that. Oh, you know, like 3/4 length trousers on and scruffy trainers and terrible dress sense. But great lad. Always got on with him. And do you know why? Again, I'm showing a theme here. He was always honest. Always honest. There's no hiding what Kyler is. He says it. He is what he is on the tin. He's one of them kind of characters. But he's funny. He's just a great lad. I think I got him on my podcast, and the way that he tells it, and he came on, he told a story about when he had to come out of the first team for a while because he set his balls on fire by mistake, or his balls were burning because he dropped all hot milk on his balls, and he had to go to Sunderland Royal, and you're like, what the heck? Like, he coming on and tell stuff like that. So characters like that, I'm always going to get on with. But he's one of them guys that's funny without meaning to be funny. Yeah. Just because he's so honest and he just tells it how it is. And it's refreshing in this day and age, because so many people, I think, put on masks and chat stuff that's not real and
Yeah.
talk about all kinds of stuff that's not real. He's just comes on, he says it how it is.
Oh,
I
he's
burnt
great.
my balls pipes and I'm in the Sunderland Royal, and you're like, mate, I burst out laughing because I didn't know it was coming when he told it there. Great guy.
He's brilliant. I've got a Kevin Kyle story, and I've got to probably make an apology to him. But years ago, the plan was to interview him, and he was the loveliest guy. Yeah, of course, I'd love to speak about my time with Sunderland. I'd love to speak about my time with Sunderland. This was back in the day on Facebook. It was, funnily enough. He says, "Yeah, no problem." I says, "You've got some time on Sunday?" He says, "Yeah, of course I have, mate." He says, "What is it you do?" I said, "I do a bit of writing, do a bit of podcasts and stuff like that." And this is 2016. Like, I'm not qualified. I'm blogging. I'm not writing. I'm blogging.
Yeah.
And I'd wrote an article on him, basically discussing how the problem with Kevin Kyle was he was always meant to be the heir to Niall Quinn, and he wasn't Quinny, and it wasn't his fault. And I've read it back literally every single time because I'm that kind of person. I'm anxious. I get nervous about stuff. And I've read it through, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's fine. It's no problem. It says, actually, Kevin actually wrote an article about you the other day. It's talking about how great of a guy you were and how you went to work on the ships and do all this kind of thing. And to me, the article that I wrote was like, you know what? He was unlucky that he was the heir to Niall Quinn and was a completely different player. But look at what he's doing now. He's working for his family, doing this and all this sort of stuff. And at the time, I thought it was, it was fine. Looking back, I can kind of see the holes in why it might have pissed him off. But stupid idiot,
did it piss him off?
Oh, I sent him it. And I was like, look, I've wrote this thing, and it shows me a really good light as a lad, as I thought at the time, as I say, as a blogger, not a writer. And he read it and he went, yeah, some journalists are good. Some of them just talk absolute fucking shit. And with that, I'll leave Sunday. And I got blocked on Facebook and I love Kevin Kyle. Like, I love him.
Jesus.
What a great guy.
Have you spoke to him since? Have you sorted that out?
I haven't sorted it out, sadly. I want to sort it out because I love him and I love his podcast and I love him and I loved him when he was at Sunderland. Always threw himself in front of everything. And I always feel terrible that I've offended Kevin Kyle. And you know what? I didn't mean to. So Kevin, if you ever do listen, I am sorry. I do love you.
I think he'll come back around with that. Mind you, I ain't read the article, but I think he'll be all right with that. That was right though.
That's what I felt. Yeah.
Well, I would say it. I mean, naturally, because he's big and he holds the ball up and he's good in the air, people are going to look at him coming in as a sort of an heir to the throne, as you say, of Niall Quinn. It might have been different if you did put things in the article like he weren't as good in the air, his touch weren't as good, he's not a good goal scorer, because basically then you're just butchering him.
I think I think I did butcher him at parts. I think I put down that he's moved to Coventry didn't work out because I think he got voted their worst ever player.
I loved him. He's the sort of like I'm a manager now, obviously, and not just his personality, but the way he played. He gave you everything, and he'll go and head things where people won't put their feet. He's that kind of lad, and I like characters like that. I've got a few in my team at the minute, and he had a good touch, and he was quite quick, and he was a good goal scorer. I'd put him in my team. I think he's a good player, but more than that, he's a great lad.
I think if it wasn't for because he got quite a bad hip injury, it's something that kept him up for the best part of a year. But that season where we missed out in the playoffs, I think he scored 16, 17 goals. And I think, you look at I think at the time we'd gone from Phillips and Quinn, so it felt like anyone underneath that was like a downgrade, including the likes of Marcus Stewart, who was dynamite.
Of course.
But
Andre Flo.
Less about that man.
Move on. He's a great lad, though. What I will say about him, a real positive, bright human being. Really liked him.
Good player when he was at every other club. It goes to show you that sometimes it just doesn't work out. But with Kyler, like the thing that I quite liked about him was there's a goal against Sheffield United I always remember, and it was at Bramall Lane. And I can't remember who swings it in. I think it was George McCartney. And George McCartney swings a cross in. And I think it's Jagielka, sticks his boot in. And Kevin Kyle's still there with his head, gets it in the bottom corner. And I think he's took a kick to the head or he's took a boot. But he's straight in with the fans. It just hasn't affected him. And I suppose what I'm trying to say here is I always really liked Kevin Kyle. And I really don't want him to think that I hated him. And please unblock me, because I've got bad anxiety over it for 4 years now. Talking about you moved to Sunderland, I think it's been well documented that at the time, and understandably so, you didn't want to leave Leicester. That makes total sense to me. Why would you have wanted to at the time? You scored the last goal at Filbert Street. I know they were relegated, but it's your club. You know, you can quite easily come back up. But Sunderland come in for you. And I know obviously the story behind it was Leicester said, you've kind of got to go. This is decent money.
Yeah.
How regular of a situation is that for a footballer where you have to look like the bad guy or the traitor and you can't really say anything, but you know that's not the case and you can't speak out till 10, 15 years later?
Yeah. Great question. And it happens a lot all the time, I think. You still see it happening now. So I'm trying to second guess, because you don't know for sure, as someone on the outside now looking into certain transfers, you don't know for sure if that, because every player that turns up is obviously going to have the big smile. He's going to say the trigger, you know, sayings that he's going to do on Sky Sports, wherever. I'm so pleased to sign, buzzing, looking forward to it. And at the time, I wasn't. But as soon as I started playing, as soon as I played the first game, and then the realization, I'm a Sunderland player now. I've been bought for big money. I've got to put everything into this. And, you know, and then Leicester was a distant memory. As soon as I played that first game, Leicester was a distant memory. But I think you see it happen all the time. And it was no lie. I didn't want to leave. You know, imagine you dreaming for something for 12 years, which what it was, 8 to 20 when I got in the first team. And then you realize that dream, and then 16 games later, you sold. It's just, it was just difficult at that time. But as soon as I played, and, you know, the difference between the two clubs, Leicester's a huge club, but after you're finishing games at Leicester and you come outside, there's probably anywhere between 50 and 100 people shouting for autographs and photos. The first game that I played for Sunderland and came out, and there's 8,000 still outside the ground asking for pictures, photos, autographs. I was like, wow, this club is massive. You know, the fan base, the passion. And a lot of players shy away from that or don't like the fact that the fans express it both ways in Sunderland. I think if you're playing well, obviously they're loving you, the passion. And if you're not playing so well, they're on your back and they're getting at you. But as a footballer, I didn't mind that. Do you know what I mean? I embrace that and try and use it to better your performances.
Talking about the manager that you came under, we've spoke on Howard, but you came under Reedy, and Reedy, in my lifetime, my first game was 93, so Peter Reid's untouchable pretty much. Maybe Allardyce for 6 months, but Reedy's untouchable is my greatest ever Sunderland manager, because the first 6 years were just phenomenal and there's so many good memories with it. But when he signed you, that's kind of when things started going, not just because he signed you, by the way. When you came in, shall we say, that's when things were going like severely wrong. We'd gone 7th, then boom, 17th, and it was like, oh, all right. And I can't remember who played first game of the season, but I know the first home game was Everton and we lost 1-0. And then we played United.
Debut.
Yeah, it was.
He came on as sub exactly the same time as me.
It was. You're right.
He was 16. I was 19. No, I was 20. And I was thinking, who's this young joker? 16-year-old. And after about 2 minutes, I got the ball and I took someone on, and he sort of ran around to, you know, engage me before I crossed the ball. And we were coming shoulder to shoulder, and I thought, this little 16-year-old's getting flung all over the place here. And I just went boom, and I ended up in the advertising hoardings. And I was like, Jesus. And then in that game, you've seen some touches, you've seen his strength. I thought, fucking hell, this kid might be something special. You could tell that then. But no, Reedy, it did start going wrong the season before I signed, didn't it? Yeah. You went 17th, but you'd stayed in the Premier League, and then they signed me. They signed Tor Andre Flo, Stephen Wright,
Thomas Myra,
Marcus Stewart. There was quite a few players that came into it, and there was some great players there. You know, Kevin Phillips, Niall Quinn, Stefan Schwartz.
Marcus Stewart was a good signing, really. He'd scored a few years beforehand. It was looking at the team, it was a good team, and I think it goes to show you that it's not always the quality, it's sometimes the cohesion in there. But what I find quite interesting is that whenever I've heard you speak before about Peter Reid, you've always been full of praise and said like a change when Howard Wilkinson came in and so on and so forth. As a fan, I remember it being like, is this like too long with Reedy? Has he been like an Eddie Howe kind of moment? He'd been there too long. But from a dressing room perspective, then, did you still feel as together as always with Reedy? You couldn't quite put your finger on what was going wrong.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it was weird, mate, because you look around the dressing room. I remember doing this in the Newcastle game, the first derby that I ever played in. It was
St.
huge.
James's.
Yeah, St. James's. We lost 2-0. And I was looking around the dressing room that day, and when you're seeing Kevin Phillips, Niall Quinn, Jason McAteer, Phil Babb, Thomas Sorensen, I was huge players. The gaffer, everyone loved him. Everyone loved Peter Reid still. So we were sort of around that time thinking, we know we weren't playing too well, but we were thinking, why are all the Sunderland fans, not sticking with the gaffer? He's like, we loved him, top man. Yeah. And I thought it was going to start different because I don't know if it was the first game. It was one of the first games when we drew 1-1 with Man U. And we played really well. Andre Flo scored, I think, on his debut. Yeah. That's the one. McAteer and Roy Keane.
Right in your book.
That was brilliant. That one. Yeah,
Incredible.
Put that in your fucking book, Roy. But that was a good game and we played well. And you thought, this is going to be a decent season. I thought that season, around about that time, we were going to finish around mid-table. That's what it felt like. And they definitely, I don't know if Bob Murray's come out and said it now, but I think he did get rid of Reedy too soon. Whether it was he got rid of whether he got rid of him too soon or whether it was the appointment of Howard Wilkinson as his predecessor, but it was one of the two, because it was just a bad decision to replace Reid with a Wilkinson.
McCarthy would have been. Do you think if we'd gone from, because obviously McCarthy came in March and we lost like the last 11 games, but we were, for want of a better word, it was fucked by that point anyway.
Yeah. We would have stayed up.
Yeah, if McCarthy came in, I feel like there would have been something there, because I remember at the time it just been, there's so many names being flung about. I'm pretty certain, and this is rumour mill central, but I'm certain that McCarthy was the actual man that he wanted, and he rang Howard Wilkinson to ask him what he thought, and Howard Wilkinson went, oh, well, what about me? And for some bizarre mental reason, he decided to choose Howard Wilkinson. I spoke to Kevin Phillips, did a talking with Kevin Phillips a few years ago, actually just last year, funnily, and he was talking about Howard Wilkinson's grasping the nettle moment. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
When he brought in the bag of nettles.
Yeah, and he put his hand in the bag. Mate, some of the things that he did, mate, people think like I'm joking when I talk about some of the stuff that he did. My famous one is the geese one, where he made us sit down and watch a documentary and have geese fly in formation, which I understand the sentiment when you first put it on, but like you can tell that story in 2 seconds. Look, geese, if they stick together and they have to go through all this hardship of crossing one continent to another, they have to work as a team. Yeah, I get it, Gaffer. Like, I know we're footballers, but we're not fit. But to sit there for 40 minutes watching this documentary, you're like, Jesus, no one talk. He used to come in and say things like, no one talk, just listen to it, understand it. It's going to help us. And then going to the stadium and doing team building exercises, like trust falls. You have to fall off a table and your teammates are catching you. The worst thing ever to do with footballers, because the banter mill is just going to like, oh, sorry, mate, I weren't looking. And boom, people were whacking their heads off floors and all sorts. It was just, mate, and then the nettle one, he did some stuff, mate, that I was just like, like we said at the start of the podcast, mate, he was way behind the times by that time, I think.
A lot of people that I've spoke to about the Wilkinson situation, the stories are funny and they've said, like, some people have said, I understand why he did it. Some people have said, yeah, the psychological side, maybe that was before his time or too late. I don't know. But a lot of people have said the main problem was you would have a meeting about a meeting and there wasn't enough football played. And that was basically it. Yeah,
it was. And to break it down even further than that, because of that, we just weren't fit as a team. So we were getting, like, teams were out running us, out working us. It was just a meeting about a meeting, mate. That's what we used to call it, meeting about meeting. And the only one that it looked like to me, enjoy going to him, was Phil Babb. He was the one that was always like, nah, this is good. And he seemed to like really like the gaffer. The only one. Everyone else was just like not having him.
What were the like, what were the more experienced pros like with that? Because I'm trying to think of the dressing room at that time. You would have had Jody. Actually, would Jody have been experienced and he would have still been quite young? But Jockey Bjorklund would have been in there, played at World Cups and stuff like that. And you've got a guy grasping nettles. There must have been like they wouldn't have had WhatsApp then, but there must have been some kind of like chat where you could all speak. Maybe MSN Messenger. Who would have known? We're going real back there.
Yeah.
There must have been conversations. Yeah, BB. Yeah, that's right.
Remember BB Blackberries? We all had them.
That's my age now. I'm showing my age.
Do you know what? What I will say is, I don't think, at the time you just knew he was bad, but I don't think there was people sort of talking between each other like, we've got to get him out. Let's down tools. Let's, and I know that happens in football clubs now, but genuinely, I would say it if we were all talking behind his back saying he's shocking, he's awful. But I don't think we were. You just knew that you didn't think he was a great manager, but we knew that we had to stay with him because he's what we've got if we didn't want to get relegated. So, but he just wasn't up to it, mate. And Steve Cottrell wasn't up to it. It was a bad time to have them two trying to lead you out of that mess. And like your question was, if Mick McCarthy had come in straight away, I'm positive would have stayed in the Premier League that year.
Do you know when Mick McCarthy came in, there's one player, right, who I thought was so talented. Not rapping, but he was talented with his feet, but he never really made it. But Mick McCarthy brought a player in, Sean Thornton.
Yeah.
What are your memories of Sean? Because I know there's a story in there somewhere. There's got to be a Sean Thornton, just the way it rolls, isn't it?
Mate, the craziest kid. Even though I didn't have a long career, I played with a lot of people, a lot of characters, especially breaking through at Leicester. So many characters like crazy bastards as well.
Savage.
Savage.
Matt
Elliott, Jerry Taggart, Frank Sinclair, Andy Imper. Like this crazy Gary Parker, crazy. Yeah. But out of all of them, this is how I'll say about Sean Thornton. He is without doubt the craziest. Just for what he did and how he was, and his decision making was just off the scale bad. Do you know, like knocking on you go away for an away trip and you're staying in a hotel room down in London.
Yeah.
And normally Jeff would be with him, Jeff Whitler.
Yeah.
You get a knock at your door Friday night before a big championship game the next day. And this is not to put him down in any way because he was a brilliant player. But
he was.
Me and Jeff Pipes coming out for a few beers. Me and Jeff are sneaking out the back of the hotel and going out in London for a bit. Man, lads, we've got a fucking game tomorrow. Are you fucking thick? And they're like, no, come on, it'll be fun. Like, just things like that. But when they played, it's a weird one because you never looked at them and thought they're not taking this football seriously. They were. It's just the kind of lads that they were. Frank Sinclair was like it. Gave everything on a Saturday afternoon, but would go out on a Friday night and have a few beers and get a bit steaming before a Premier League game on a Saturday. For someone like me, and the way I think, I wouldn't be able to do that and perform at the highest level. But funnily enough, those guys can make them decisions and still really perform to a high level on the Saturday. But just crazy.
Talking about Jeff Whitley there, Jeff's someone, again, that I've spoken to and mainly in depth about the kind of issues he's faced with his drinking and drugs and stuff like that. And I was taken back, I'll not lie, and what a great guy. And he's obviously working at the wellbeing team at the moment at the PFA and helping a lot of footballers, I think, anonymously. A fantastic guy now, but obviously he's had his issues. Out of curiosity, you've been quite open and honest about the issues that you had when football finished. Yeah. Is Jeff someone that you have crossed paths with and maybe shared sort of an understanding with, shall we say?
Yeah, funnily enough, I don't keep in constant contact with Jeff. I've spoke to him on a few occasions since I left, but the time that I did speak to him, which is weird, is because when you look back at both our timelines now, I was going through the worst period of my life and he was going through the worst period of his life.
Yeah.
The last time we properly spoke and had a chat, it was probably 2-3 years after we left Sunderland. And I was taking drugs, drinking, depressed, suicide attempts, and at the exact same time, when I spoke to him, I bumped into him. I think it was in Manchester. We both didn't look great, but you don't realize at the time. You don't realize that you've put a bit of weight on. You look a bit unkept. You don't look right. You don't look good. You're not looking after yourself properly. And I didn't recognize that in Jeff, and he didn't recognize it in me. But when you look back at the timeline, we were both going through our major struggles then. And the way we spoke to each other is the same old way that guys talk to each other every day. How are you, big man? Yeah, everything's great, mate. All's good. And that's the problem with it. You can't help the people that you don't know who need the help. And not a lot of people are open enough to say that they need help and they're struggling and they're going through a bad time. As blokes, especially, women do it as well, of course, but we put a face on the front of it. And we need to open up a little bit more. But because I looked at that with me and Jeff, that, I've read some of the articles that talk about his bad time, and it was almost mirrored in what happened with me.
Yeah.
And they're the times that we were both going through when we both were saying, yeah, mate, everything's good. Looking forward to it. We're moving forward. And yeah, it was the total opposite.
Sort of standing still. What I found quite interesting about Jeff was, and you probably can maybe mirror the story here as well, as he spoke about, he said, I did this and did this. And he talked about where it went from, how his house looked like a spa shop, all the drink and the drugs, and that was there. And then got all the way to where he is now. And he says, people look at me and think, oh, he's recovered. He's like, I still have to, I still go to AA meetings. And Kieran Brady, someone who speaks fantastically well on it. He still has to, like every week at the time when we spoke, they still have to keep on top of it. It's not just a case of there's a problem and you fix it. Did you find, is that quite similar with you? Do you still find you have to kind of have a bit of a check now and again and just, be like, am I still on the path I want to be on?
Yeah, so for me, it's slightly different. Mm-hmm. So when I went to rehab and sort of went through that process, obviously I went to AA, and I did that for 4 or 5 years after and going into the future. I stopped drinking for almost 2 years. Obviously I've not took a drug since, before I went into rehab. So that's probably, that's over 10 years now. I've not had any drugs, any recreational drugs. But I started drinking again. And a lot of people look at that and think, so I don't drink to excess now, but I call it to socially lubricate. When I'm out with my friends and I fancy a beer, I'll have a beer. If I fancy a glass of wine with my missus, I'll have a glass of wine. But what they do say in rehab is that once you do have a problem with drink and being able to control your consumption of it, and it becomes a detrimental aspect of your life, you should never drink again, which I understand. And I agree with to a certain extent. And a lot of people, when I did the Under the Cost podcast, a lot of people have sort of come below in the comment section and said that I fear for him because in the future, if he started drinking again, he will always get a problem again. But my view on it is, what I had lost in my life at that time was a purpose. So from a kid growing up, I always had a purpose, something that's pulling me forward, which is to become a professional footballer. And once you're a professional footballer, you want to become the best you can. You want to earn money, score goals, win trophies. So you have a purpose while you're a professional footballer. Football finishes for someone like me, or even if you have a bit of a longer career like Jeff, and your purpose in life has gone. So even when you've got children, like I had, like Jeff has, even when you've got a wife, you've got a house, that's great. Your family is here, but you still need a purpose in life, something to draw you forward, to keep you on a pathway, to try and achieve, something to wake up for in the morning. And a lot of people don't understand, that haven't struggled through those difficult times, that family is a different part of your life. It's the biggest part of your life, but it's a different part of your life. You still need purpose in a professional way, or something that you want to do, or a passion outside of your family that's going to pull you forward and keep you on a pathway. And that's what I lost. And now looking back, that's what I understand. I will always need that. So my purpose now is to grow and develop the FSD Academy that helps 16, 17, 18-year-olds to find their purpose, whether it's football or education or that passion that we talk about, and put them on a path. And that is an unlimited purpose for me, because it can always grow and expand. And every year, 12, 15, 20 lads will come to us. After 2 years, they will leave. Another intake comes in, another intake. So I've managed to put in place something that gives me purpose now for as long as I want it to. It's not an end cause, because I'm helping youngsters, and those youngsters keep coming year on, year out. I've got a constant purpose that keeps me on a pathway, keeps me fit, healthy, and driving and striving forward. I think the struggles come when you lose a purpose. That's what I believe.
I've online as well. I've openly been quite honest with the fact that, like, I've struggled as well. And it's funny you mentioned about the purpose. I wouldn't say I had a drink problem, but I would say I drank more than I ever have in my life. Yeah. And it was when I had a purpose from the outside looking in, but then you look back and it was a case of there was something missing. So I was missing what really was I wanted to do, and go out and do stuff. And I had a wife, I had a family, 2 cats. I had a job that I loved. I had a business that I got on with. Outside looking in, it was perfect. But I kept going out drinking relatively frequently, consistently, and thinking, and kind of starting to realize there was a problem there. And eventually you start to realize it was because, and I'll keep it private what it was, but there's something that was missing for me. And I didn't understand what it was that was missing. So going through therapy, which is something I did for a good couple of months, and they just let me chat. And eventually it was like, oh, that's why you're doing that, because you need that. If you understand that that's what you need, then you can kind of either go for that or have an understanding of that's something that your personality needs. And then you don't necessarily need to fill it in with drink or drugs or whatever it may be, with myself being drink. And the understanding of it is, but I'm 31 before I did that. I'm 34 this year. It took me till being 31 to be like, right, I'll go in and say that I don't think I'm a great guy because I'm doing this. And there is the shame that comes with it, and there's all those other emotions that come with it. But I absolutely echo what you're saying there 100%, because I felt like once I found out what it was that I was missing subconsciously for me, you can sort of fill that gap in, or learn to live with it, and not medicate it, so to speak. Medicate absinthe, as it was in my case.
And it is a constant for me. And as Jeff has talked about before, it is a constant that you have to keep developing. For me, you have to keep doing it, and being aware of, and I've got things in place now that help me. So fitness, being open and sharing, as you did, with a therapist. So I don't go to, I've been to therapists, but I have people around me now that if I'm feeling down or depressed, or I wake up and I just don't quite feel right, I talk about it. I open up, I share about it. I go and do the fitness, the weight training. So I've got little triggers now that if you feel it coming over yourself, I can act immediately to sort of bring myself out of it. The problem was it would come over me before I knew these triggers, what they were. And then the next day you've neglected the day before because you've not dealt with it. And then the next day you feel a slightly bit worse and you don't deal with it. And then the days become the weeks, become the months, until you're in a place that you think only getting obliterated or taking some kind of drug is going to help you get through it. So Jeff's right. Every day I do my training. I go for my run. If I don't do it, I don't feel as good as the day before. Then if I've not ate well for a constant period of time, I feel a little bit of it coming over, and then all of a sudden it gets on top of you. So it is a constant process.
Yeah, no, I echo. I couldn't say anything different to what you said from my own experience. Absolutely 100%. Final question for me is in relation to sort of your book that's coming out. Obviously don't want to give away too many stories, because please go and buy it when it's out. But what I found quite interesting was when you said it was coming out, you said, I think a lot of people dislike me after this. Which I found quite funny. But then I think the guy who obviously ghostwrote it with you or co-wrote it said that, I don't think people are going to do that. I think people are going to quite like it. But so when you're releasing a book, and I think we spoke off air, there might be one or two things about certain people that maybe might not go down to 100% well with them. So is it quite nerve-wracking when you want to write as honestly as you obviously are, but then at the same time you don't want to upset people?
No, it was really difficult. I mean, the main one was my dad, because I know now, Graham, my dad's going to read it. He don't read much. And I was sort of going through a process where I thought the last 6 weeks have been really difficult. And I only told him that I've done a book 10 days ago. And it was because I was building up to that point. I didn't want to say I've done a book and this are the kind of stories that are going to go in it, because he won't like it, mate. I know it. Me and my dad are close now, but he won't like some of the stories. He's very private. But to give everyone a grasp of who Matt Piper is and why he is the lad that he is today, I've got to tell them difficult stories of when I was younger, and the sort of the backwards and forwards that I had with my old man. So that was difficult, and I told him, and when he reads it, we'll see. He's not very well at the minute, so I hope that I don't think he will, but I know that there's going to be some stories in there that he would have preferred not shared. But that's the difficult process with doing a book. When it's an autobiography, you've got to tell it how it was, or there was no point in doing it.
Yeah.
And I said that to him, and I think he understands. So that was very difficult. The other difficult one was telling stories that could hurt someone else. So not just hurt them as in their feelings, but it could hurt them with what people thought about them after the story that I've told. So it was a difficult balance, because you do, of course, I mainly want people to look at me and think, wow, he's open and he's so honest. But of course, sometimes you can't give every single little detail, because I don't want to be writing a book and hurting someone else in a detrimental way if I didn't need to, and I can still get the theme of the story across. So that was difficult, trying to peg your way through that. But it was difficult because, I've not done anything awful in my life. Anything awful, like where I'm going to go to prison if the police found out about it or something like that. I'm talking, when I talk about, I remember the tweet that you said, when I talk about that, it's more of, because I built, my character now is reflected quite well, I think, through the things that I do, the podcast, people who don't know me, I think they will know that I'm a decent guy.
Yeah.
I'm a quite nice guy. I try and be a bit funny, a bit all the other bits, but I'm down deep. I'm a nice kid. And I think that's reflected well. Now, some of the stories in the book will suggest differently to that. Some of the bad decisions that I made, some of the not so great stuff that I did when I was under the influence of alcohol or drugs or in them dark places. But that's why I put that tweet out. But you got to put the stories out there, and you got to let people judge for themselves. So when it comes out on the 31st of August, and people start reading the book, we'll see if my Twitter following drops off a cliff or. Oh my God! I didn't know it was like this. What a clown! Fuck him off.
500 followers down from 12,000.
Yeah.
You're right in what you're saying, though. I mean, I think everyone, if they've got to a point where they've needed to go to therapy, unfortunately, you've probably hurt people on the way.
Yeah,
I can hold my hands up and say that I've probably done that as well. And I think it depends on how many times you do it. And then at that point, when you get to the end of it, if you start clicking on pretty early doors and go, I'm going to get help for this, you can only but apologize for, hurting people because of going out late, drinking, whatever it is that you can do to hurt someone, which is sometimes you don't even recognize. But I'm sure it'll be a funny read in parts as well. We've talked very serious towards the end there, but I'm pretty sure there'll be some stories in there that'll make me howl.
Oh, there's all sorts in there, mate. There's some good ones. There's some that you will have heard before. Sorry, I wanted to get him on a podcast. Can I get him on yours?
Yes, of course you can. Oh, amazing. What's his name?
Sonny.
Amazing. After Montari?
Yeah. His real name's Santino, but we call him Sonny. But I wanted to get him on a podcast, so I'm glad you let him on yours, big man.
I could never put my dog on it because as much as I love her, she's incredibly ugly. A really, really ugly and old dog. But Pipes, thanks very much. Awesome chat.
Mate, thanks for having me, buddy. Really appreciate it.
More than welcome.